The morning sun hadn't yet burned off the fog at Fort Mason when Staff Sergeant Rebecca Chen walked into the weapons training facility for the first time in 6 months. Her right hand trembled slightly as she reached for the door handle. She noticed it. She always noticed it now. Inside, the familiar smell of gun oil and metal hit her senses. 25 new recruits sat in neat rows, fresh-faced and eager, waiting for their advanced weapons training to begin. Rebecca took her place at the back of the room, trying to make herself invisible. She had requested this refresher course herself. After the injury, after the surgery, after the endless physical therapy, she needed to prove she could still do this. The doctors had cleared her. The psych eval was passed, but Rebecca knew the real test was here in this room with a rifle in her hands. Master Sergeant Dale Kovac strode to the front of the room. He was a barrel-chested man with a crew cut so precise you could use it to draw straight lines. His reputation preceded him, a hard instructor but a fair one, or so people said. "Listen up," Kovac barked. "This is advanced weapons training. If you're here, you've already passed basic, but basic doesn't mean squat in the field. I'm here to make sure that when your life depends on your weapon, you don't freeze up like a deer in headlights." Rebecca watched him pace across the front of the room. His eyes scanned the recruits, sizing them up one by one. When his gaze reached the back row, it stopped on her. "We have someone special joining us today," Kovac announced, his voice dripping with something Rebecca couldn't quite identify. "Staff Sergeant Chen has decided to grace us with her presence, fresh off medical leave." The room fell silent. 25 pairs of eyes turned to look at her. Rebecca felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her expression neutral. She had known this wouldn't be easy. Coming back never was. 6 months ago, Staff Sergeant Chen was involved in an incident during a training exercise, Kovac continued. His words were technically factual, but his tone suggested something else entirely. Ended up with some nerve damage, shaking hands, but here she is, ready to prove she's still got it. The word incident hung in the air like an accusation. It wasn't just an incident. It was an explosion that had killed 2 soldiers and injured 5 others. Rebecca had pulled 3 people from a burning vehicle before the second blast threw her 20 feet through the air. The nerve damage in her hand was the least of what she'd walked away with. But Kovac didn't mention any of that. He didn't mention the medals or the commendations or the lives saved, just the shaking hands. "All right, let's get started," Kovac said, moving toward a table lined with disassembled M4 rifles. "Today we're covering speed assembly under stress. In combat, you might need to clear a jam or reassemble your weapon in conditions that are less than ideal. Darkness, chaos, enemy fire." He picked up the pieces of a rifle, his movements confident and practiced. "The current record for blindfolded assembly in this facility is 18 seconds, set by yours truly 3 years ago." A murmur of appreciation rippled through the recruits. "Now who wants to go first?" Kovac asked. Hands shot up around the room. Kovac selected a young man in the front row, barely old enough to shave. The recruit bounded to the front, eager to impress. Rebecca watched as one by one the recruits attempted the assembly. Some did well, others fumbled, dropping pieces or installing them backward. Kovac corrected them all with sharp words and sharper observations, but there was an almost paternal quality to his criticism. He wanted them to succeed. That warmth never extended to Rebecca. As the morning wore on, her turn grew closer. She could feel Kovac's attention circling back to her again and again, like a hawk waiting for the right moment to strike. Finally, he called her name. "Staff Sergeant Chen, let's see what you've got." Rebecca stood and walked to the front of the room. Her hand trembled as she approached the table, just slightly, a minor shake that most people probably wouldn't even notice. But Kovac noticed. "Nervous?" he asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. "No, Master Sergeant," Rebecca replied evenly. "Those hands tell a different story." He gestured toward her right hand. "Maybe you should sit this one out. We wouldn't want you to hurt yourself." The words landed like a slap. Around the room, a few recruits shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Rebecca met Kavek's eyes. "I'm fine, Master Sergeant, ready to proceed." "Fine," he said with a shrug, "but we'll start you off easy. No blindfold, just a standard timed assembly." It was a deliberate insult. Every other recruit had been offered the blindfold option. Taking away that choice meant he didn't think she could handle it. Rebecca positioned herself at the table. The disassembled rifle lay before her in neat pieces. She had done this thousands of times. Even with the tremor, her muscle memory was intact. "Begin," Kavek said, clicking his stopwatch. Rebecca's hands moved automatically. Upper receiver, lower receiver, bolt carrier group, charging handle. Her right hand shook as she worked, but her fingers knew where every piece belonged. She didn't fight the tremor, she worked with it, timing her movements to the natural rhythm of her hand. 23 seconds. Not her best time, but respectable. She stepped back from the completed rifle and looked at Kavek. He glanced at the stopwatch and snorted. 23 seconds, that's adequate for a recruit in basic training. The insult was clear. She was a staff sergeant, not a recruit, and 23 seconds was well above adequate for a timed assembly. "Would you like me to try with the blindfold, Master Sergeant?" Rebecca asked quietly. Kavek's expression darkened. "I don't think that's necessary. We've all seen enough." "With respect, Master Sergeant, I'd like to try." The room went absolutely silent. Challenging an instructor wasn't done, not like this, but Rebecca had already been humiliated. What did she have to lose? Kavek stared at her for a long moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't a kind smile. "All right, Staff Sergeant. You want to embarrass yourself in front of these recruits, be my guest." He picked up the blindfold from the table. "But when you fail, you're done. You withdraw from this course and you admit that maybe, just maybe, you came back too soon." Rebecca felt her heart hammering in her chest. This was the moment. This was what she'd been training for, preparing for, dreading for 6 months. "Understood, Master Sergeant." Kavek stepped forward and tied the blindfold around her head. The world went dark. She could hear the breathing of 25 recruits, the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, the slight rustle of fabric as Kavek stepped back. "Whenever you're ready," he said. She could hear the smugness in his voice. Rebecca reached out and let her fingers brush across the table until they found the first piece. The lower receiver, cold metal under her fingertips. Her hand was shaking. She could feel it, but she couldn't let it stop her. She had spent 6 months in physical therapy, learning to work with the tremor instead of against it. 6 months of waking up at 4 in the morning to practice in her garage, assembling and reassembling her personal rifle in the dark until her fingers bled. 6 months of doubt and fear and the constant question, could she still do the job she loved? This was her answer. Rebecca took a deep breath and began. Her fingers moved like water, flowing from piece to piece. The tremor was still there, but it didn't matter. She had memorized every surface, every edge, every connection point. The rifle came together in her hands like it had always belonged there. Upper receiver, bolt carrier, forward assist, magazine release. Each piece locked into place with a satisfying click that she felt more than heard. Around her, the room was absolutely silent. Her fingers found the last piece, the rear takedown pin. She slid it into place and felt the rifle complete itself in her hands. Done. Rebecca pulled off the blindfold and set down the assembled rifle. She looked directly at Kavek. His face had gone pale. He was staring at his stopwatch like it had betrayed him. "Time, Master Sergeant?" Rebecca asked. Kavek's jaw worked silently for a moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. 12 seconds. The room erupted. Recruits were on their feet, clapping and cheering. Someone whistled. Someone else shouted in disbelief. Rebecca didn't smile, she didn't celebrate. She simply stood at attention, waiting for Kavak to dismiss her. But Kavak wasn't done. The color had returned to his face, flooding it with red anger. "Quiet," he roared. The room fell silent instantly. "Sit down." The recruits dropped back into their seats. Kavak circled Rebecca like a predator. 12 seconds, very impressive, almost too impressive. Rebecca's stomach dropped. She knew where this was going. "Makes me wonder," Kavak continued, "if maybe someone's been getting special practice. Maybe someone tipped you off about today's exercise. Maybe you've been rehearsing this specific drill." "No, Master Sergeant," Rebecca said firmly. "I practiced on my own time with my own equipment, standard training protocol." "Or maybe," Kavak said, leaning in close, "that tremor of yours isn't as bad as you've been letting on. Maybe you've been playing up the injury, looking for sympathy, special treatment." The accusation hit Rebecca like a physical blow. Around the room, she could see the recruits' expressions changing. Doubt crept into their eyes. Was she faking? Was this all some kind of con? "That's not true," Rebecca said, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. "Then prove it," Kavak snapped. "Do it again, right now, different rifle, no warning." He grabbed a rifle from the opposite end of the table, one that had been customized with different attachments and modifications. He disassembled it himself, mixing up the order of the pieces, and shoved the blindfold back at her. "Go ahead, Staff Sergeant. Show us it wasn't just a lucky guess." Rebecca's hand was shaking harder now, not from the nerve damage, but from anger and humiliation and the sick realization that no matter what she did, it would never be enough for this man. But she tied the blindfold on anyway, because walking away meant admitting he was right, and she would rather die than give him that satisfaction. Her fingers found the unfamiliar rifle pieces, different weight distribution, different attachments. The scope threw off the balance. The custom grip changed the angle of assembly. The second assembly took Rebecca 2 seconds longer than the first, but it was still faster than any recruit in the room had managed with their eyes open. Still faster than Kavak's precious record. But it wasn't enough. 14 seconds, Kavak announced flatly. "Slower. Interesting how performance drops when you don't have time to prepare." Rebecca pulled off the blindfold. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him exactly what she thought of his accusations and his transparent attempts to humiliate her. But she was still a soldier, still bound by rank and protocol. "Permission to speak freely, Master Sergeant," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Denied," Kavak replied immediately. "Return to your seat." The rest of the day passed in a haze of barely suppressed rage. Rebecca sat through lectures on malfunction drills and clearing procedures, but the words washed over her without meaning. She could feel eyes on her, some sympathetic, others curious, a few openly skeptical. Kavak had planted the seed of doubt, and it was already taking root. When the training day finally ended, Rebecca was the first one out the door. She needed air. She needed space. She needed to be anywhere but in that room with that man. "Hey, Staff Sergeant, wait up." Rebecca turned to see a young woman jogging toward her. Private First Class Maria Santos, one of the recruits from the morning session. She had kind eyes and a nervous smile. "That was amazing what you did in there," Maria said breathlessly. "I've never seen anyone move that fast. You barely even hesitated." "Thank you, Private," Rebecca said, her voice still stiff with anger. "Don't let him get to you," Maria continued, lowering her voice. "Kavak, I mean, everyone knows he's difficult." "Difficult is one word for it." Maria glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "My brother went through training here 2 years ago. He told me Kavak has a thing about women in combat roles. Doesn't think we belong here. He's harder on the female soldiers than anyone else." Rebecca wasn't surprised, but hearing it confirmed still made her stomach turn. "Did your brother report it?" "He tried," Maria said. So did a couple of the women in his unit, but Kavak's been here 15 years. He's got friends in high places. The complaints went nowhere. Of course they did, Rebecca muttered. Maria hesitated, then reached out and touched Rebecca's arm. Look, I don't know what happened to you before you came here, but whatever it was, you're stronger than he is. What you did today proved that. Rebecca felt some of the tension drain from her shoulders. I appreciate that, Private, really. Call me Maria, and if you ever need someone to practice with, I'm in Barracks 12. As Maria walked away, Rebecca felt a small spark of something she hadn't felt in months. Hope, maybe, or solidarity, the reminder that not everyone saw her as broken. But that spark died 3 days later. Rebecca had been keeping her head down, completing every drill perfectly, never giving Kavak another opportunity to single her out. She arrived early, stayed late, and made herself as invisible as possible. It wasn't enough. On Thursday morning, she was called to the office of Captain James Morrison, the commanding officer overseeing the training facility. Rebecca had met Morrison once before, shortly after her injury. He had seemed sympathetic then, even encouraging about her recovery. The man sitting behind the desk now didn't look sympathetic. Staff Sergeant Chen, sit down, Morrison said without preamble. Rebecca sat, her spine straight, hands folded in her lap to hide the tremor. Morrison pushed a folder across the desk toward her. Master Sergeant Kavak has filed a formal concern about your fitness for duty. The words hit Rebecca like cold water, sir. He states that you display erratic performance, potential instability, and possible deception regarding the severity of your injury. Morrison's voice was clinical, detached. He's recommending a full medical and psychological reevaluation before you're allowed to continue with active duty. Rebecca's mind raced. Captain, with respect, my performance has been exemplary. I've exceeded standards on every drill. Exactly, Morrison interrupted. That's part of the problem. According to Kavak, your performance is too good, inconsistent with someone suffering from nerve damage. So I'm being punished for being competent. You're not being punished, you're being evaluated. Morrison leaned back in his chair. Look, Chen, I know you've been through hell. I read the report from the accident. What you did that day was heroic, but Kavak makes a valid point. If your injury is affecting you, we need to know. And if it's not affecting you, we need to understand why your medical records say otherwise. Rebecca felt the trap closing around her. My medical records are accurate. I do have nerve damage. It causes tremors in my right hand, but I've learned to compensate. I've trained. On your own, Morrison said, without supervision, without reporting your progress to your medical team. I didn't know I needed to file reports about practicing basic skills. Morrison's expression softened slightly. I'm not the enemy here, Chen, but I have to take this seriously. Kavak's been training soldiers for 15 years. He's got instincts about this stuff. If he says something's off, I have to investigate. What he has, Rebecca said quietly, is a problem with women in combat roles. Ask anyone who's gone through his training. He targets female soldiers, undermines them, tries to force them out. Morrison's face hardened. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious problem. Do you have evidence, documentation, specific incidents beyond your own experience? Rebecca thought of Maria's brother, of the complaints that had gone nowhere, of the careful wall of protection that 15 years of service had built around Kavak. No, sir, she admitted, just testimony from other soldiers. Testimony that was investigated and found to be unsubstantiated, Morrison said. Look, I'm ordering the reevaluation. It's not personal, it's protocol. You'll report to medical tomorrow at 0800. Until we get the results, you're suspended from training exercises. Suspended, the word tasted like failure. Temporary, Morrison emphasized. If everything checks out, you'll be back in a week, maybe less. Rebecca stood, knowing the meeting was over. "Permission to speak freely, sir." Morrison nodded. "This is exactly what he wants. Kavak wants me to quit, to give up and transfer out, and you're helping him do it." "I'm following protocol, Staff Sergeant, that's all." Rebecca saluted and left the office before Morrison could see the anger burning in her eyes. The next week was the longest of Rebecca's life. She endured batteries of tests: physical, neurological, psychological. Doctors measured her grip strength, her reaction time, her fine motor control. Psychiatrists asked her about nightmares and flashbacks, and whether she felt safe around weapons. She answered honestly, because lying would only make things worse. Yes, she had nightmares about the explosion. Yes, she sometimes heard ringing in her ears that wasn't really there. Yes, her hands shook and probably always would. But no, none of that made her unfit for duty. She had learned to live with it, to work with it, to be a better soldier because of it. The doctors listened and made notes and gave nothing away. While she waited for the results, Rebecca spent her days in limbo. She wasn't allowed on the training grounds, wasn't allowed near the weapons facilities. She felt like a ghost haunting Fort Mason, present but not really there. Maria visited her twice, sneaking away from training to check in. She brought news from the course. Kavak was pushing the recruits harder than ever, as if Rebecca's absence had freed him to be even more demanding. "He mentions you sometimes," Maria said during her second visit. "Not by name, but everyone knows who he's talking about. He says things like, 'This is why we have standards. This is why not everyone belongs in combat roles.' It's pretty clear what he means." Rebecca listened with a hollow feeling in her chest. Even in her absence, Kavak was using her as an example. A cautionary tale about broken soldiers who couldn't accept their limitations. On the 8th day, Rebecca was called back to Morrison's office. The captain looked tired as he gestured for her to sit. "Your results came back." Rebecca held her breath. "Physically, you're cleared for duty. The neurological team confirms the nerve damage, but they agree you've developed compensatory strategies that don't impair your performance. Your psych eval shows some stress markers, but nothing outside normal range for someone with your combat history." Relief flooded through Rebecca. "So I can return to training." Morrison hesitated. "There's a complication." Of course there was. During your evaluation period, Kavak filed a second report. This one alleges that you've been conducting unauthorized weapons training in your personal quarters. He says he has a witness who saw you entering the barracks with a disassembled rifle case. Rebecca's blood ran cold. She did keep her personal rifle in her room. It was legal, properly registered, and completely within regulations for off-duty training. But that wasn't how Kavak would spin it. "I have a registered personal weapon that I use for practice," Rebecca said carefully. "It's completely within regulations." Kavak is arguing that your obsessive practice indicates an unhealthy fixation. Combined with your injury, he's painting a picture of a soldier who's pushing beyond safe limits. That's insane. Soldiers practice all the time. Not like you do, apparently. Morrison pulled out another report. According to the witness statement, you were observed practicing blindfolded assembly in the barracks common area at 0200. Is that true? Rebecca closed her eyes. She had been practicing late at night when she couldn't sleep, when the nightmares made rest impossible. She'd thought everyone was asleep. She hadn't realized anyone was watching. "I practice when I can't sleep," she admitted. "Is that a crime?" "It's evidence of possible obsessive behavior, combined with everything else," Morrison trailed off. "Combined with everything else, it's enough for Kavak to build a case that I'm unstable," Rebecca finished. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? He's not going to stop until I'm gone." Morrison didn't deny it. "I'm giving you a choice, Chen. You can continue to fight this, go through another round of evaluations, possibly face a formal fitness board. Or, board. Or you can request a transfer. Take a position that doesn't involve combat training, administration, logistics, recruitment. You'd keep your rank, your benefits, your service record. You just be somewhere else. Somewhere safe, somewhere easy, somewhere she wouldn't be a problem. Rebecca thought about the 2 soldiers who had died in the explosion, about the 3 she'd pulled from the burning vehicle, about every person she'd ever served with who had trusted her to have their back. "No," she said. Morrison blinked. "No. No, sir. I'm not transferring. I'm not giving up. And I'm not letting a bigot with a grudge decide my career path." "Chen, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. I'm a decorated soldier with an exemplary service record. I've passed every test you've thrown at me. The only thing standing between me and doing my job is one man who decided I don't belong here." Rebecca leaned forward. "So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to return to training. I'm going to complete the course. And I'm going to do it so well that there's no question about my fitness for duty." Morrison studied her for a long moment. "And if Kavek keeps pushing, then I'll push back." The captain sighed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Respectfully, sir, Master Sergeant Kavek made this hard. I'm just refusing to make it easy for him." Morrison stood, signaling the meeting was over. "You're reinstated as of tomorrow, but Chen, watch your step. Kavek will be looking for any excuse. Don't give him one." Rebecca saluted and left, her mind already racing. She had won this round, but the war was far from over. Rebecca returned to training the next morning with her head high and her resolve stronger than steel. She expected hostility from Kavek. She expected difficult drills and impossible standards. What she didn't expect was silence. Kavek barely acknowledged her presence. He didn't call on her during demonstrations, didn't single her out for special attention. It was as if she had become invisible. At first, Rebecca was relieved. Maybe Morrison had warned him to back off. Maybe the medical clearance had convinced him to drop his vendetta. But Marya knew better. "He's planning something," the young private whispered during a break. "I've seen him like this before with other people he wants gone. He goes quiet right before he strikes." "Let him plan," Rebecca said. "I'm not afraid of him." But she was cautious. For 2 weeks, she kept her performance solid but not spectacular. She didn't want to give Kavek any ammunition about showing off or being unstable. She arrived on time, followed every instruction to the letter, and kept her interactions professional and brief. The tremor in her hand was worse some days than others. On bad days, she worked through it, refusing to let it slow her down. On good days, she was grateful for the respite, however temporary. The other recruits had started to warm to her. Marya had spread the word about Kavek's bias, and several of the younger soldiers began seeking Rebecca out for advice. She helped them with their technique, offered encouragement when they struggled, and slowly built a small community of people who saw her as a mentor rather than a liability. It was during one of these informal training sessions, 3 weeks after her reinstatement, that everything fell apart. Rebecca was in the weapons maintenance room with 4 recruits, showing them a faster method for field stripping a rifle. The official training day had ended an hour ago, but the recruits had asked for extra help, and Rebecca was happy to provide it. She was halfway through a demonstration when the door crashed open. Kavek stood in the doorway, his face flushed with fury. Behind him stood 2 military police officers. "Staff Sergeant Chen," Kavek said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "Step away from the weapon." Rebecca froze, her hand still on the disassembled rifle. "Master Sergeant, what's going on?" "Put down the weapon and step back, now." The recruits scattered to the sides of the room, their eyes wide with confusion and fear. Rebecca carefully set down the rifle pieces and raised her hands. "Someone want to tell me what this is about?" she asked, her heart pounding. One of the MPs stepped forward, a young man with apologetic eyes. "Staff Sergeant Chen, we need you to come with us. There's been an allegation." "What kind of allegation?" Kovac moved into the room, his boots heavy on the concrete floor. "3 rifles are missing from the weapons inventory, rifles that were last signed out under your authorization." Rebecca's mind raced. She had signed out weapons for the recruits earlier in the week, standard procedure for their training exercises, but she'd personally verified the return of every weapon. "That's impossible. I checked them all back in myself. I have the logs." "The logs show you signed them out," Kovac interrupted. "But the physical inventory shows they're gone. 3 M4 rifles, missing, under your supervision." The room spun. Missing weapons was a career-ending offense, court-martial level, prison level. "I returned them," Rebecca insisted. "I watched them get logged back into the armory. Someone needs to recount." "We've counted 3 times," Kovac said. "They're gone, and you're the last person to have had access." One of the recruits stepped forward, a young man named Jackson who had been part of the training exercise. "Master Sergeant, I was there when Staff Sergeant Chen returned the weapons. I saw her hand them to the armory clerk. This doesn't make sense." "Did you see the clerk log them into the system?" Kovac asked. Jackson hesitated. "No, sir, but—" "Then you didn't see them returned. You saw her hand them over. What happened after that is anyone's guess." The MP cleared his throat. "Staff Sergeant Chen, we need you to come with us while we sort this out. It's procedure." "This is a setup," Rebecca said, looking directly at Kovac. "You know it is." "I know that 3 rifles are missing and you're responsible," Kovac replied. "Everything else is speculation." Rebecca wanted to fight, wanted to scream that this was exactly the kind of thing Maria had warned her about. But the MPs were just doing their job, and making a scene would only make her look guilty. "Am I under arrest?" she asked quietly. "Not yet," the senior MP said, "but you're confined to quarters pending investigation, and will need your personal weapon secured." Rebecca felt the walls closing in. Her personal rifle, the one she'd used for months of late-night practice, would be taken as evidence, the one piece of normalcy she had left. "Of course," she said, her voice hollow. They escorted her from the weapons room. As they passed through the doorway, Rebecca caught Maria's eye. The young private looked devastated, but she gave a small nod. She believed Rebecca. It wasn't much, but it was something. The next 72 hours were a blur of interrogations and statements. Rebecca told the truth over and over. She had returned the weapons. She had watched the clerk take them. She had no idea where they could have gone. But the evidence was damning. The sign-out log showed her signature. The inventory showed the weapons missing. And when they searched her quarters, they found something that made her blood run cold. "Care to explain this?" Captain Morrison asked, holding up a small notebook. Rebecca stared at it. She'd never seen it before in her life. Morrison opened it and began reading. "June 8th, checked South Armory access. Guard change at 2200. June 15th, confirmed emergency exit bypass code. June 22nd, identified blind spot in security cameras." Each date corresponded to a day when Rebecca had been on base. Each note suggested reconnaissance for a weapons theft. "That's not mine," Rebecca said. "I've never seen that before." "It was in your footlocker, under your personal effects." "Then someone put it there. This is a framed job and you know it." Morrison set down the notebook. "What I know is that the evidence keeps piling up. Missing weapons, unauthorized access notes, and now we've got testimony from the armory clerk that you seemed rushed and agitated when you returned the weapons, that you didn't wait for him to complete the logging process. Because there were other people waiting, I stepped aside so he could help them while he processed the returns. That's normal procedure. The clerk says you left before he could verify the count." Rebecca felt the trap tightening. "Let me talk to him. Let me hear him say that to my face." Morrison shook his head. "He's a witness in an active investigation, no contact." "This is insane. Who benefits from me being kicked out? Who's been trying to get rid of me since day one?" "You're suggesting Master Sergeant Kovac planted evidence." "I'm suggesting he has motive and opportunity, and a history of targeting female soldiers." Morrison stood up, his patience clearly exhausted. "Here's where we are, Chen. 3 weapons are missing. Evidence suggests you had the means and opportunity to take them. And now we have what appears to be a planning document in your possession. That's enough for a court-martial." "So you're charging me?" "The investigation is ongoing. But yes, formal charges are being prepared." Rebecca felt something break inside her. Not her spirit, she was too angry for that. But her faith in the system, in the idea that truth and justice would prevail, shattered like glass. "I want to see the security footage," she said. "From the armory, the day I returned the weapons." Morrison hesitated. "There isn't any." "What?" "The cameras in that section were malfunctioning that day. Maintenance issue. We don't have footage from the time period in question." Of course they didn't, because Kovac had thought of everything. "How convenient," Rebecca said bitterly. "Staff Sergeant, I recommend you get a lawyer, a good one." Morrison's voice softened slightly. "For what it's worth, I hope you're telling the truth, but the evidence is what it is." Back in her quarters, confined and alone, Rebecca sat on her bunk and tried to think. There had to be something. Some piece of evidence Kovac had overlooked. Some witness who could corroborate her story. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Yeah," she called. The door opened a crack and Maria slipped inside. She looked terrified but determined. "You shouldn't be here," Rebecca said. "If they catch you talking to me." "I don't care." Maria sat down next to her. "This is wrong. Everyone knows it's wrong." "Knowing it and proving it are 2 different things." "Then we prove it." Maria pulled out her phone. "I've been asking questions quietly, and I found something." Rebecca looked at the screen. It showed a photo of a duty roster from 3 weeks ago. "Look at who was on armory duty the day those weapons went missing," Maria said, pointing to a name. Rebecca's eyes widened. "That's Kovac's nephew. Private First Class Derek Kovac, transferred here 6 months ago. He was the clerk who supposedly logged your weapons return." The pieces started clicking together. Kovac had his nephew Mies log the return, make it look like the weapons never came back. And then probably stashed them somewhere to be found later, maybe in a location connected to you. Maria scrolled to another photo. "And look at this. The maintenance log for the armory cameras. The malfunction was reported by Derek Kovac," Rebecca finished. "He disabled the cameras." "It's all circumstantial," Maria warned. "I'm not even sure it's admissible. I'm just a private. I don't know how this stuff works." But Rebecca was already standing, her mind racing. "It's enough to raise reasonable doubt, enough to demand a deeper investigation." "There's one more thing." Maria hesitated. "I heard Kovac talking to his nephew yesterday. I was walking past the armory and they didn't see me. Kovac said something about finishing this by the end of the week, that it would be cleaner if you just resigned rather than facing a court-martial. He wants me to quit before this goes to trial, before I have a chance to fight back." "What are you going to do?" Rebecca looked at the young private who had risked everything to help her, who had believed in her when the entire system seemed designed to tear her down. "I'm going to do exactly what Kovac doesn't expect," Rebecca said. "I'm going to fight, and I'm going to win." But first, she needed a plan, and she needed help from someone who knew how to navigate the military justice system. She needed someone who had faced down powerful men before and won. Rebecca pulled out her phone and dialed a number she'd kept for emergencies. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Colonel Sarah Martinez speaking." "Ma'am, this is Staff Sergeant Rebecca Chen. I served under you in Germany. I don't know if you remember me, but—" "Rebecca, of course I remember you. You saved half my unit during that training disaster. What's wrong?" Rebecca took a deep breath and told her everything. When she finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Colonel Martinez said, "Give me 48 hours. I'm coming to Fort Mason. And Staff Sergeant, don't sign anything, don't talk to anyone, and don't you dare give up. We're going to burn this thing to the ground." Colonel Sarah Martinez arrived at Fort Mason like a force of nature. She was 53 years old, with silver streaking through her dark hair, and a reputation that made junior officers straighten their spines when she walked past. She had spent 30 years in the Army, 20 of them fighting battles that had nothing to do with enemy combatants and everything to do with corruption, bias, and the kind of institutional rot that festered in dark corners. Rebecca met her in the visitors' center, still confined to base, but allowed supervised meetings with her legal representation. Martinez took one look at her and smiled. "You look like hell, Chen." "Thank you, ma'am, I feel worse." "Good, anger's useful. Keeps you sharp." Martinez sat down and opened her briefcase. "I've spent the last 2 days reading everything I could get my hands on about this case, and about Master Sergeant Dale Kovac. And he's been a busy man. You're not the first person he's tried to run out. You're just the first one who hasn't folded." Martinez pulled out a stack of files. In the last 8 years, Kovac has been involved in 6 separate incidents involving female soldiers under his command. 3 transferred out voluntarily. 2 were discharged for various alleged infractions. 1 filed a formal complaint that went nowhere. "Maria mentioned complaints," Rebecca said. "Maria Santos, the private who's been helping you," Martinez nodded. "Smart kid. She's got good instincts. The information she gathered isn't enough on its own, but it's a start." "So what's our play?" Martinez leaned back in her chair. "We're going to request a formal Article 32 hearing. It's like a grand jury, a preliminary hearing to determine if there's enough evidence to proceed to court-martial. And we're going to use that hearing to put Kovac on trial instead of you." "Can we do that?" "Not officially, but we can raise enough questions about the investigation and the evidence that the hearing officer will have to take a harder look at what really happened." Martinez pulled out another document. "I've also filed a request to interview Private First Class Derek Kovac under oath." Rebecca felt a spark of hope. "You think he'll crack?" "I think he's a 22-year-old kid who probably didn't fully understand what his uncle was asking him to do. Put him in a formal hearing, under oath, with the threat of perjury charges. Yeah, I think he'll crack." The next week was a whirlwind of preparation. Martinez worked 18-hour days, building their defense and digging into every aspect of Kovac's service record. She found patterns, subtle ones but consistent. Female soldiers under his command had higher rates of disciplinary action, higher rates of injury reports, higher rates of transfer requests. None of it was smoking gun evidence, but together it painted a picture of systematic bias. The Article 32 hearing was set for a Thursday morning. Rebecca wore her dress uniform, medals polished, shoes shined to a mirror finish. Her hand trembled as she fastened her belt, but she didn't try to hide it. The tremor was part of who she was now, part of her story. The hearing room was smaller than Rebecca expected. A long table at the front for the hearing officer, a stern-faced lieutenant colonel named Patricia Hayes, tables for the prosecution and defense, chairs for witnesses. Kovac sat on the prosecution side, his face a mask of confidence. He didn't even look at Rebecca as she entered. Captain Morrison was there too, looking uncomfortable. He gave Rebecca a brief nod that might have been sympathetic or might have been apologetic. She couldn't tell. The hearing began with the prosecution laying out their case. Missing weapons, Rebecca's sign-out authorization, the suspicious notebook found in her quarters, the testimony from Derek Kovac that she had left before the weapons were properly logged. It was damning. Even knowing it was a setup, Rebecca could see how convincing it looked on paper. Then it was Martinez's turn. "Lieutenant Colonel Hayes," Martinez began, "the defense contends that Staff Sergeant Chen has been the victim of a deliberate frame-up orchestrated by Master Sergeant Kovac. We further contend that this frame-up is part of a pattern of behavior targeting female soldiers under his command." The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed major named Thompson, objected immediately. "The Master Sergeant is not on trial here." "No, but his credibility as a witness is absolutely relevant," Martinez countered. "We intend to show that Master Sergeant Kovac had both motive and means to fabricate evidence against Staff Sergeant Chen." Hayes considered this. "I'll allow it, but keep it relevant, Colonel." Martinez called her first witness, Private First Class Derek Kovac. The young man looked like he wanted to disappear. He took his seat, swore his oath, and avoided looking at either Rebecca or his uncle. "Private Kovac," Martinez began gently, "you were the armory clerk on duty the day the weapons in question were supposedly returned. Is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you testified in your statement that Staff Sergeant Chen left before you could verify the return of the weapons." That's what I said, yes." "But is it what happened?" Derek's eyes flickered to his uncle. Kovac's expression was stone. "Private Kovac," Hayes interjected, "you're under oath. Answer the question." Derek swallowed hard. She did hand me the weapons, but there were other people waiting, so she stepped aside while I helped them. That's normal procedure." "So she didn't leave the armory?" "No, ma'am, she waited, and I logged the weapons back into the system." The room went silent. Even the prosecutor looked surprised. "You logged them back in," Martinez repeated, "so they were returned?" "Yes, ma'am, all 3 of them." "Then how did they end up missing from the inventory?" Derek's face crumpled. I changed the log later, after everyone had gone." Kovac shot to his feet. "This is ridiculous. He's obviously been coerced." "Master Sergeant, sit down," Hayes ordered. "Private Kovac, are you saying you deliberately falsified an official inventory log?" "Yes, ma'am." Derek's voice was barely a whisper. "My uncle asked me to. He said it was important. That Staff Sergeant Chen was dangerous and needed to be removed from duty before she hurt someone." "And you believed him?" "He's my uncle. He's been in the Army for 15 years, I thought. I thought he knew what he was doing." Martinez leaned forward. "Where are the weapons now, Private?" "In my uncle's storage locker, Unit 247 in the base storage facility. He has the key." The room erupted. The prosecutor was objecting. Kovac was shouting about lies and slander. Hayes was banging her gavel for order. Rebecca just sat there, watching the man who had tried to destroy her career fall apart in real time. "We're taking a recess," Hayes announced. "Captain Morrison, I want that storage locker searched immediately. Private Kovac, you're confined to quarters. Master Sergeant Kovac, you're suspended from duty pending investigation." "This is a witch hunt," Kovac roared. "That kid is lying. He's been manipulated." "The kid just confessed to falsifying records at your request," Hayes shot back. "I suggest you stop talking and get yourself a lawyer." 2 hours later, MPs returned with 3 M4 rifles recovered from Kovac's storage locker. The serial numbers matched the missing weapons. The hearing reconvened, with a very different energy. Martinez called her next witness, Maria Santos. The young private detailed everything she had observed: Kovac's pattern of harder treatment toward female soldiers, his comments about Rebecca not belonging in combat roles, the overheard conversation about finishing this by the end of the week. Then Martinez called Rebecca herself. Rebecca told her story from the beginning: the explosion that had killed her friends, the injury that had left her hand damaged but not defeated, The months of rehabilitation and training. The first day back at Fort Mason, when Kavak had mocked her shaking hands in front of the entire class. And when you assembled that rifle blindfolded in 12 seconds, Martinez asked, what were you trying to prove? That I wasn't broken, Rebecca said quietly. That my injury didn't define me, that I could still do the job I loved. And how did Master Sergeant Kavak respond? He accused me of cheating, of faking my injury, of being unstable. Rebecca looked directly at Kavak. He couldn't accept that a woman with a disability could be better than him, so he decided to destroy me instead. Martinez let that statement hang in the air for a moment. Staff Sergeant Chen, in your opinion, are you fit for duty? Rebecca held up her right hand. It was trembling, the tremor visible to everyone in the room. My hand shakes, she said. It always will. The doctors can't fix it, but I've learned to work with it. I've trained harder than I've ever trained in my life. I can do everything required of my position, and I can do it well. She lowered her hand. So yes, Colonel, I'm fit for duty. I always was. The hearing concluded with Hayes's recommendation. All charges against Rebecca Chen to be dropped. A full investigation into Master Sergeant Dale Kavak's conduct to be opened. Court-martial proceedings to be initiated against both Kavak and his nephew for falsifying records and conspiracy to frame a fellow soldier. Rebecca walked out of that hearing room with her head high and her career intact. But the story didn't end there. 2 months later, Rebecca stood in front of a new group of recruits at Fort Mason's weapons training facility. She was now the lead instructor for advanced weapons training, Kavak's old position. The court-martial had been swift and brutal. Derek Kavak had been dishonorably discharged. Dale Kavak had been sentenced to 4 years in military prison and stripped of his rank and benefits. The investigation had uncovered evidence of misconduct going back nearly a decade, falsified reports, manipulated evaluations, and systematic discrimination. 3 other female soldiers who had been forced out under suspicious circumstances were being offered reinstatement. Rebecca's first class as lead instructor included 28 recruits. 12 of them were women. Maria Santos stood in the front row, having been promoted to specialist for her role in uncovering the truth. "Good morning," Rebecca said, her voice carrying to the back of the room. "I'm Staff Sergeant Chen, and I'll be your instructor for advanced weapons training. Before we begin, I want to tell you something important." She held up her right hand. The tremor was there as always. "I have nerve damage from a combat injury. My hand shakes. Some days it's barely noticeable. Some days it's worse. But I don't let it define what I can or cannot do." Rebecca walked to the weapons table and picked up a disassembled rifle. "Today, we're going to learn speed assembly under stress. The record for blindfolded assembly in this facility is 12 seconds. I set that record my first day back after medical leave." She could see the surprise and respect in the recruit's eyes. "I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you this because every single one of you will face challenges in your military career. Injuries, setbacks, people who tell you that you're not good enough or strong enough or that you don't belong. And when that happens, you have 2 choices." Rebecca set down the rifle. "You can believe them and give up, or you can prove them wrong." She picked up a blindfold. "Who wants to go first?" Hands shot up around the room. Men and women alike, all eager to learn, all ready to push themselves. Rebecca smiled. This was where she belonged, not despite her injury or her struggles, but because of them. Because she understood what it meant to fight for your place in a world that sometimes didn't want to make room for you. "All right," she said, "let's get started." As the class began, Rebecca caught sight of a familiar figure in the doorway. Colonel Martinez stood watching, arms crossed, a proud smile on her face. She gave Rebecca a small nod, one soldier to another, acknowledging the battle fought and won. Rebecca nodded back and turned to her students. The tremor in her hand was just part of who she was now, a reminder of what she'd survived and overcome. And as she began to demonstrate the proper technique for rifle assembly, her movements sure and practiced despite the shake, she knew that she had become exactly the kind of soldier she had always hoped to be.